This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
A lack of quality sleep has a profound yet largely unrecognized impact on our health and wellness, relationships, safety, and even our sex lives. Statistics are waking us up to the fact that an astounding 70 million Americans are not getting the sleep that their bodies and minds require. Dr. Michael Breus is a practicing clinical psychologist with a specialty in sleep disorders and a diplomat of the American Board of Sleep Medicine. Dr. Breus has good news and a plan for everyone to get the rest that they need and to make every night a good night. And now, Dr. Michael Breus.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wanted to start off our lecture today by answering a question that I get asked very often, which is, why is sleep so fascinating to me? And it's a bit of a rhetorical question, because the truth of the matter is sleep is fascinating to everyone. Everybody sleeps or doesn't. And that can be quite a big issue for many folks out there. And so one of the things I oftentimes find is people come up and they ask me questions about themselves. They may ask me questions about their kids, about their parents, about their friends. So everybody, I think, has an innate curiosity about what is sleep, because we just sort of go to bed and we turn out the light and hopefully we fall asleep, and then all of a sudden we wake up the next day. Hopefully we feel refreshed, hopefully we've had a good night's rest, but a lot of people don't really know what goes on during that time period while we're asleep. And so one of the things that's great about my job is I get to learn about that, and I get to help people hopefully get a better situation while they're asleep. Now, a lot of people ask me, well, you know, did you study for this? Is there a school for this? How did that work? How old is sleep medicine? Well, the good news is we've been hopefully sleeping since the dawn of time, but sleep medicine itself is actually a relatively new form of medicine. What we found is the very first sleep clinic was formed in the 1940s. And if you think about that, that's relatively young compared to, Hippocrates, thousands and thousands of years ago, looking and understanding more about the body and things of that nature. And so sleep is a very new field. It's a very exciting field. I went to the National Sleep Convention this year, and what I found, something new happens every year, something not just a little bit new, something unbelievably new. A couple of years ago, we found genetic aspects for narcolepsy. Now we're starting to learn more information about a new form of sleep apnea. I mean, it's amazing that every single year we start to learn something new. But the thing that really gets me most about sleep medicine is my ability to actually change people's lives. I have a great opportunity where, normally for a clinical psychologist, sometimes you may see patients and it could take years before you start to see treatment gains. And I have the great opportunity of oftentimes being able to change people's lives almost in 48 hours. It's really been quite an experience for me. And I want to tell you about one of the first patients that I saw, one of my first successes. When I walk into the room, and he's a little bit heavy set, and we start to talking, and he's a GBI agent. That's the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. My original practice was in Atlanta, and it's sort of like the FBI, but on the state level. And we started talking a bit, and he said, Dr. Breus, he said, I've had some real problems. I said, well, tell me a little bit more about it. He said, well, here's the thing. I fell asleep on stakeouts. I snore so loud that people won't even sit with me in the car. They put me into a desk job now, and he said, and I'm gaining weight. I'm miserable. When I go home, I'm not happy to be home. I'm not happy to do the things that I used to be able to do. I'm not particularly nice. I'm kind of cranky all the time, and I don't feel good when I wake up in the mornings. I said, all right, well, let's kind of take a look at this. So we start talking a little bit more. Within a few minutes, I realized that he's got a lot of the signs and symptoms of something called obstructive sleep apnea. That's a situation where people stop breathing at night. Now, the good news is they start back breathing, but they wake up several times a night. This fellow, as it turns out, was having episodes of stopping breathing literally hundreds of times a night. Had absolutely no idea that this was going on, which is oftentimes the case. So I sent him to the sleep laboratory to have a sleep test done. And we did a special kind of study where half the night we would diagnose him, and then half the night we put him on something called a CPAP machine. This is a machine that helps people breathe throughout the evening. So he comes back a couple of weeks later for the results, and I walk in, and his wife is there. And she wasn't a small person either, and I walk in, and she walks up, and she gives me this tremendous hug. She said, I just want to thank you. And I said, well, whatever for? And she said, you gave me my husband back. It was really amazing. Turns out he had horrible sleep apnea. We put him on a CPAP machine, and he turned to me and he said, and I'll never forget this, he said, Michael, he said, here's my card. There's a number on the back of that card. He said, if you're ever in trouble, call that number, and you won't be. I keep that card right about here, just to let you know. And as they were walking out, the wife turned to me and she said, I don't think I'll be needing these, and she handed me a group of papers. And as they left, I opened them up, and they were divorce papers. She had actually gotten to the point where she was about ready to file for divorce because it was such a horrible situation with him. So I think I've actually saved more marriages as a sleep specialist than I ever would have as a clinical psychologist, just being able to help people get a better night's rest. And there's a lot of things we don't know about sleep, but there are some things that we're actually currently learning. One of the things that we found is that we've done some polls and we start to understand how many people are suffering from sleep-related symptomatology. Back in the year 2000, almost 62% of the population, 62%, that's 6 out of 10 people, were saying that they had some form of a sleep problem. Well, that number's increased dramatically, and now by 2005, that number's increased all the way up to 75% of the population is reporting some symptom of a sleep disorder. Could be a symptom of insomnia, could be a symptom of sleepiness, could be a symptom of apnea. 75%, that's 3 out of 4 people. If you're having problems falling asleep, if you're having problems staying asleep, if you wake up in the middle of the night, is this a common problem? It's an incredibly common problem. As we know, 75% of the people in the US are reporting a sleep problem. Did you know that almost 50% of people snore? Now that's kind of an interesting statistic, right? Everybody's kind of looking at their bed partner in the audience here. So one of the things we know is that snoring in and of itself may or may not be harmful from a physiologic perspective, but boy, it sure is a social nuisance, isn't it? A lot of people find that they don't sleep particularly well with a bed partner who's snoring next to them. I'm going to explain some data a little later on, but one of the things that we've learned from a more recent study is that you lose approximately 1 hour of sleep while sleeping next to a snoring bed partner yourself, not to mention the sleep that they could be losing. Because a lot of times, snoring can actually be a sign or symptom of that disorder I was talking about with the GBI agent, of obstructive sleep apnea. Sleep deprivation, or the lack of sleep, and also don't want people to think of sleep just in minutes, but I want people to think of sleep as in quality sleep. So the lack of good quality sleep can affect almost every area of your body, both mentally and physically. Everything from your creativity, there have been studies to show that people are less creative when they're sleep deprived, their productivity, memory has an effect from sleep, relationships, even sexual activity is all affected by your ability to sleep or to have good quality sleep. So one of the things that most people don't know and understand is there are actually 88 sleep disorders out there, which is actually pretty amazing. It's amazing to me that there could be 88 possible things that could go wrong while you're sleeping. Now, one of the other things that we're starting to learn more about is how many millions of Americans are suffering from some of these sleep disorders. Currently, we think that almost 70 million Americans are suffering, and that by the year 2010, we think that number is going to increase up to 80 million Americans. So if you think about that, there are what, about 300 million Americans currently? That's about 1 in every 4 people could potentially be having a sleep disorder, sleep problem. Now there's a big difference between what I call a sleep disorder and what I also call disordered sleep. Now a sleep disorder is a formal medical diagnosis. It's something like apnea, narcolepsy, insomnia. It's something that you can go to your physician and be able to talk with them and say, hey, I think I've got these symptoms, and they'll have some good ideas about some current treatments and things like that to help you with. Disordered sleep is very, very different. Disordered sleep is more wake up and gosh, I just don't feel so good. I got 8 hours of sleep, or I got 7 hours of sleep, or whatever my requisite number is, and I'm not feeling well. It's poor quality sleep. And one of the things that we're knowing and understanding now is there are a lot of different ways that we can help improve people's poor quality sleep. And so I'm going to talk a lot about quality sleep today, and I want to make sure everybody knows and understands the difference between what I call disordered sleep and a sleep disorder. I also want to dispel a myth right out of the gate. Okay, we've heard for a long, long time that everybody needs 8 hours of sleep. Well, the truth of the matter is that's not necessarily true. Everybody needs their own amount of sleep. Some people need 9 hours, some people need 7 hours. What I want people to know and understand here is sleep is a perception. And I don't mean that you think that you're sleeping, therefore you are sleeping. I mean that how you think about your sleep actually helps you understand and dictate how you feel about your sleep. So if you wake up after 6.5 hours and you say, wow, I feel good, well then that's probably your sleep number. You may not need more than 6.5 hours. I've always been a 6.5 hour, 7 hour guy. My wife may need 8.5 or 9 hours. Somebody in the audience could need as much as 9.5 or 10 hours. That's okay. There is, however, one interesting study that looked at a window of opportunity for sleep. And what they found was that people that sleep less than 5 hours and people sleep more than 10 hours have a greater mortality rate than those who sleep within that window. So we know there's a window for sleep, but people can actually move quite a bit within that window. If you have disordered sleep, it could be affecting your career. It could be affecting your health. It could be affecting your relationship. It could even make you look older, and believe it or not, it could prevent you from being able to lose weight. Now, people are all looking at me like, well, wait a second, you must be kidding me here. I could even, my weight, my sex life. I mean, Michael, what doesn't sleep affect? Well, almost nothing, to be honest with you. But let's talk about what a definition of what is sleep, because I think that's a very important thing to think about. Sleep is a basic drive. It's like hunger in a lot of different ways. We know that there's a drive to sleep, and that drive increases over the course of a day. So when you wake up in the morning, hopefully you've had some good quality, refreshing sleep. And then throughout the day, you have to think about it like a sleep pressure starts to build, or a drive, kind of like getting hungry. You wake up, you have breakfast, and you start to get hungry again as the day progresses through. So maybe towards lunch and then again towards dinner. Same thing happens with your sleep, but it seems to last across an entire day. That's called the homeostatic drive for sleep. There's also another function of sleep that's called the circadian rhythm. Well, your circadian rhythm is an internal biological rhythm that moves throughout the day. And there's a point in that circadian rhythm that's actually represented by your core body temperature, or the temperature internally, that actually is a point where you're going to be more likely to fall asleep. When the drive for sleep is increased and the core body temperature, or your circadian rhythm, hits the right point, you go to sleep. One other thing you have to remember is sleep is not an on-off switch. You don't just walk into a room and turn off your light, close your eyes, and go to bed. By the way, if you fall asleep before your head hits the pillow or in less than 5 minutes, that's not a good sign. That means you're sleep deprived. Sleep is more like, in my mind, slowly pulling your foot off the gas and slowly pushing it on the brake. It's a process. Lots of different things have to happen in order for you to be able to fall asleep. Now, there's been some great studies looking at people who are having sleep difficulties. We already said about 75, 76% of the population is reporting these difficulties, but they often break down into different things. People who are often waking up not feeling refreshed, 53% of the population is reporting that. 53, that's 1 out of 2 people is waking up saying, gosh, I just don't feel so good, right, after my night's sleep. 36% of people have problems falling back asleep if they're awakened, and 31% of people have a hard time going to sleep, okay? On any given night, 1/3 of the population is having a hard time falling asleep. 10% of those people, it's chronic. That's almost every night, or at least 4 or 5 nights a week. If you think about that, you probably know somebody, or you may be affected yourself by problems falling asleep. Then we start to look at it from a gender basis. Women have a much greater likelihood of having problems falling asleep. 83% of women report problems sleeping, at least occasionally. Not on a regular basis, but at least occasionally. Men, it's 17%. You know why there's such a big disparity? Because men don't like to talk about the fact that they don't sleep, right? Or that they have any medical problems, quite frankly, right? We're tough, we're going to be able to handle it. Oh, I can get by on 4.5 hours, no problem. That's not really true. Women are much more in touch with their bodies, they're much more intuitive, and they're much more willing to speak with their physicians and the people who take the polls and say, gosh, you know what? I wish I had a little bit better sleep, or maybe that's something that's affecting me. So I think that the men are probably doing themselves a disservice in a lot of ways, or at least not being willing to admit that they're having some of these problems. Interesting, age plays a good range here as well. We see that in the age range between 35 and 49, roughly 77% of these people who have sleep disorders are in that age range, or at least are expecting problems with sleep. 50 plus, that number goes to about 64%. So here's some other interesting facts about women and sleep. Women who are experiencing menopause, 75% of them have hot flashes. Now, there are all kinds of different terms for hot flashes. I've heard them called power surges, I've heard them called night sweats, I've heard them called hot flashes, all these different things, right? And guess what? About 40% of those menopausal women have problems with their sleep due to these hot flashes, okay? So one thing that a lot of the younger women have to look forward to in the audience, something that some of the other women may already be experiencing in the audience, is it's a big deal, okay? Actually, being a woman, it's very interesting. Women actually have a tendency to have more stage 3 and stage 4 sleep in general, but because of all the other issues of being a woman, a lot of women have less overall sleep. Kind of a fascinating study that was done looking at women who were pregnant, looking at women who were going through menopause, and looking just through women's menstrual cycle. And what they were finding was, and also, by the way, waking up with kids after they've had the children or breastfeeding and things of that nature, is women have an incredible amount of disrupted sleep, yet they still bounce back. Okay, guys, we're kind of wimpy in that department, right? Have you ever, seen a boyfriend or a husband who hasn't had a good night's sleep? We're pretty much a big baby when it all comes down. Yeah, you see, we're pretty much a big baby when it comes right down to it. But women really have a much better resilience towards that. But that doesn't mean that they deserve less sleep. That means that we need to focus in and try to understand more about their sleep. I want to tell you about Kathy. Kathy was a patient that I have, mother of 3, stay-at-home mom. Okay, she had her own little side business. She was a calligrapher. And so it was very easy for her when the kids were at school or down for a nap that she was able to do her business. Well, her husband was transferred all the way across the country. And so guess what, honey? We're moving. And they moved all the way from the East Coast to all the way to the West Coast. It turns out this is actually the second most stressful event that you can have other than a family member passing away, is actually picking up your entire life and moving, right? So guess what? Kathy didn't sleep too well. Okay? Kathy also had a mild history of depression. She had been on antidepressants in the past, but wasn't currently on any antidepressants. So she's starting to pack the house. She's starting to get all the things together. She's realizing what a huge job that is, by the way, while watching her 3 children. Everything seems to be going according to plan. She's got her schedule. Things are going well. And then the moving truck doesn't show. Okay? Then the moving truck finally shows 6 to 8 hours late. Meanwhile, her plane flight to get her kids and her family all the way across is now missed. So it's a pretty stressful event. They get the whole moving van packed up, move all the way across the country. Well, she shows up. She's sitting in a hotel for a couple of days because she knows it's going to take a little while for her stuff to get there. Well, guess what happened to the moving truck? It went to the wrong place. And so she was a week without all of her things, right? So now she's staying in a hotel for an extra week. And by the way, staying in a hotel sounds really luxurious until you have 3 children in the hotel with you, and then it's not so luxurious anymore. And so stress levels really started to increase. Well, when I started to talk with her, she had come into my clinic. She had already moved. And I started to ask her, well, what was your sleep like before the move? She said, wow, Michael, the week before the move, it was just horrible. Well, that makes sense, right? Lots of things going on, lots of stress. I said, well, you've been here now. The moving truck has finally showed up. You're in your home. Well, how's your sleep? And she said, it's still not so great. I said, well, tell me a little bit more about that. And what we found was that if we had balance in her sleep, she ended up with balance in her life. It was very, very interesting. What we did was we looked at her sleep schedule. We looked at her children's new schedule. And there was still a lot of stress in her life. She didn't know where the dry cleaners was, right? She didn't know where the supermarket was. She was getting lost all the time. So first thing we did was we said, go out and buy one of those little GPS things. She stuck it in her car. That helped, right? Then we said, let's take a look at your sleep. We actually had to place her on a mild antidepressant because her depression really started to kick in because she was so sleep deprived. After about a month, guess what? We had her sleep schedule regulated. We had her off the antidepressant. We even had to use a mild sleep aid at first, and we took her off that as well. So all it was a matter of was balance. Balance with sleep equaled balance with life for her. It's pretty amazing. So a lot of people need to think about that. How is my sleep balanced? How is my life balanced? So one of the things I want to show you here is taking a look at a sleep cycle. First of all, we generally have a tendency to go from wake to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Then we'll go back up to stage 2 and then often into REM sleep. Now, first of all, what is stage 1 versus stage 4 sleep? That's the first question that people often ask. Stage 1 sleep is very light sleep. Stage 2 sleep is a little bit deeper, but not by much. It's still that kind of light sleep. Stages 3 and 4, and they've actually now been redefined as just stage 3, turn out to be very, very deep sleep. This is the wake up and feel great sleep. This is the I wake up and I feel refreshed, I'm ready to meet the day, I'm ready to go sleep. That's the good stuff. That's the stuff you want to get. The yellow bar here represents REM sleep. That's the rapid eye movement sleep. Why is rapid eye movement sleep important? We don't 100% know. There are a couple things we do know about rapid eye movement sleep. We know you have a greater likelihood of dreaming during REM sleep. We also know that memory seems to be functioning during REM sleep. It seems as though you're taking pieces of information and, if you will, moving them from your floppy disk to your hard drive. What we're learning is that memory consolidates during REM sleep, so it's a very important function. The other thing I want you to notice is there's a decent amount of stage 3 and stage 4 sleep here within the first couple of hours that you're falling asleep. This is the course of the whole night. And what you'll see across the course of the whole night is that stage 3 and 4 sleep seems to happen most in the first third of the night, and there's not a whole lot of it in the latter third of the night. But REM sleep, represented here by the yellow bar, gets much greater. So what happens? Well, you're having more REM sleep in the latter third than you are in the beginning. So does that mean that you're dreaming more late at night than in the beginning of the night? Not necessarily. What we're learning about dreaming is you can actually dream in any stage of sleep. And you've probably realized that. Has anybody here taken a nap for 15 or 20 minutes and gone into a dream state? Well, you can't physiologically get into REM sleep that quickly, unless, of course, you have something called narcolepsy. But if you're a person who doesn't have narcolepsy and you dream very quickly, you probably are dreaming in one of the lighter stages of sleep. What's most impressive to me about this slide is if you only slept 4 hours a night, you're getting a whole bunch of that good deep stuff. So what's kind of nice here is I'm not giving everybody, by the way, the prescription to only sleep 4.5 hours a night. But what I am telling you is if you have that as a situation for yourself, you're not losing out on a lot of that really good deep sleep, but it's not something that you would ever want to do every night. If you're out one night and you only get 4.5 hours of sleep, you're still going to get the good deep stuff, but we also know that your performance is going to be degraded quite a bit. Losing as little as 1.3 hours of sleep a night can actually reduce your performance by up to 32%. 32%. That's pretty amazing, right? What if you're a truck driver and you're off by 32%? That's a big deal. Or what if you're a police officer and you're off by 32% mentally? That's a big deal. But you know what I think is a bigger deal? What if you're driving carpool and you're off by 32% and you got a van full of kids? Again, that's a really big deal. So people need to know and understand, even losing a little bit of sleep can have a major effect. Let me tell you about Mary Ann. Mary Ann was a very interesting patient. She was a new mom at age 32. They had had some fertility issues. It had taken them a while to conceive. And she was finally there, and she was so excited about it. And you know what? She completely forgot about herself. She completely forgot about her sleep. She had decided to breastfeed, and what she was doing was waking up every 3 hours in the middle of the night and going and breastfeeding. Well, guess what? When the baby was napping during the day, you know what she was doing? Checking off her to-do list of things that she had missed out on. So she was getting interrupted sleep at night. She wasn't taking naps during the day to make up for that interrupted sleep. She was exhausted. As a matter of fact, she found herself at a stoplight asleep, right, with the baby in the back. So what did I do? Bring her into the clinic, talked with her and her husband, and we came up with some new strategies to help her sleep. Number one thing we had her do, we said, when the baby's napping, you're napping. Let's catch up on some of that sleep. Now, napping, and we're going to talk a little bit about napping in a little while, may not be good for everybody because people who have insomnia probably shouldn't be nappers. But people who are sleep deprived should be nappers. It's important to catch up on some of that good quality sleep, and as you can tell, in her case, it ended up being a big deal. The other thing that we did was we had her husband learn how to feed the baby at night. Well, guess what? Everybody started to do a whole lot better. Dad started to bond more with his daughter, and he got a very new appreciation for mom getting up in the middle of the night. So it was a really great situation for him to learn and for her to learn how important sleep is to her, but also how disrupted her sleep was for him. Sleep affects everything. It affects your ability to think. It affects your ability to react. It even affects your health. It affects almost every aspect of your health, from your ability to fight disease, to your sex life, to how quickly you heal. People heal better when they sleep better. There have been a lot of studies looking at hospitals. You know, you go into a hospital and for whatever the reason you're there, and if you have to spend the night, I love the fact that they wake you up at 1 o'clock in the morning to give you your sleeping pill, right? I've seen that happen on numerous occasions. They wake you up to do vitals or things of that nature. Now, the good news is now nurses are being trained, doctors are being trained that might not be such a great idea. But for a long time, that was something that was going on. Well, again, people aren't healing well if they're not sleeping well. There was a great study about 4 or 5 years ago that looked at the flu shot. They actually found that people who were sleep deprived, the flu shot didn't work nearly as well as the people who were sleeping well. That's a big deal if you're over 65. People who are over 65, if they get the flu, it can actually be deadly. So we have to know and understand how our immune system functions. We don't fight off disease nearly as well when we're sleep deprived than when we're not sleeping so well. So again, it affects every aspect of our life. It affects our ability to gain or lose weight, and I'm going to talk quite a bit about that. There's been some great new studies that have come out about that. It affects our skin health, how we look, how we appear to people. It affects our alertness, concentration. We've talked about that with driving. It affects our depression or our anxiety, Our mental health is directly related to how much we sleep. Just think about it. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, how likely are you to be in a good mood? Probably not very likely. Yeah, how likely are you to snap at somebody that you probably shouldn't snap at, or say something kind of out of character for yourself? It happens all the time, especially when you're cranky from not having enough sleep. Stress management is a big deal. We also now know that sleep deprivation even affects blood pressure and heart disease. So these are major events in people's lives that could actually get better with a better night's rest. And the one thing that has always been fascinating to me, that we have a tendency not to think of ourselves so much if we have kids, and we have to really focus in on our children and our children's health. You do realize, of course, that if our children aren't sleeping, they're not growing well. They're not able to fight off diseases well. They're having major issues, especially special needs children. I've had a recent experience of being able to start working with some autistic children. And let me tell you something, you will learn a whole lot about parents having no sleep and children having no sleep when you're working with special needs kids. So again, sleep is incredibly prevalent, it's important, and it affects all areas of your life. Now I'm going to tell you about how the right amount of quality sleep can actually make you look years younger, even help you lose weight. Beauty sleep is a great term that's been around for a very long time, but in fact, it's actually kind of accurate. There are a lot of ways that you will actually look better if you sleep more. First of all, remember this, sleep is a time out that your body requires to make all kinds of different repairs. So number one thing to remember is when you're asleep, guess what? You're not outside in the sun. And so you're not getting those damaging UV rays. You're not doing other things like being exposed to pollutants in the air, free radicals, all these different areas. So a lot of different things are bombarding you on a daily basis, and they're going to have effects on your skin, they're going to have effects on your hair, they're going to have effects just on the way you look. Deep sleep, and what I'm defining as deep sleep is that stage 3 and 4 sleep that we talked about before, that good wake up and feel refreshed sleep, does a lot of interesting things to the way you look. Number one, it gives your skin time to repair, so you have new cell growth. Number two, you have new defenses against moisture loss. One of the biggest things that we see happening during the day is you lose moisture from your skin. Why? Because it's hot out, you sweat, okay? It may give you a little bit of moisture to your skin, but then that evaporates off, and then all of a sudden you start to get a dry, flaky skin. For people who already have dry skin, it can be even worse. For people who have oily skin, your skin can almost fry. That's where we get a lot of sunburn. And it doesn't allow for free radical damage, which of course accelerates the aging process. You will also find during stages 3 and 4, there's an increase in protein production, which are the building blocks of cell growth and repair. So all of a sudden at night, we have this thing called growth hormone that comes out, and it helps our cells repair a whole lot. So for a second, let's talk about wrinkles and learn a little bit more about what they are and how they can be affected by your sleep. So first of all, what are wrinkles? Wrinkles, first of all, you need to understand that skin is sort of this network of collagen and elastin, and it forms sort of a network above your muscles. And then underneath you have muscles, you have fat, you have all these things that form a nice smooth area, whether it's on your arm, whether it's on your face, things of that nature. Now what happens is as your arteries age, all of our arteries age just like the rest of our body ages, we find that they're not as efficient in providing nutrients and nourishing these skin fibers. So what happens is they stretch. As these fibers stretch, they cause scarring, just like a scar that you would have from a laceration or anything like that. Well, when you have this stretching and then you have this scarring, you have a different type of tissue here. Also, what we find is the softest skin has a tendency to stretch the most, and then it tries to snap back. Well, when there's a scar tissue in the way, guess what happens? It forms a lump. So what you see is a protrusion from a wrinkle. Then because that skin is so soft, if it dries out, again, from losing moisture, guess what happens? Is the skin goes down and folds in. Voila, a wrinkle. So here's what's very fascinating is if you sleep a lot, or at least the right amount of sleep, what happens is you have to lower your core body temperature in order to stay asleep because our body sleeps at a different temperature. Well, how do we do that? We do that by sweating. So what does sweating do? It nourishes the skin. Now, can anybody in here remember what it was like to stay out till 3 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night? And then you look at yourself in the mirror on Sunday, right? You may not look as good as you did going out on Saturday night, right? Well, this is one of the reasons why, okay? We also see a lot of eye puffiness, a lot of skin puffiness, things like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. Even adding moisturizer at night, one of the things you'll find is a lot of the cosmetic departments, they say, use a night cream or a night moisturizer. Well, this is one of the reasons why, is because it really helps smooth over some of those wrinkles. Now, there's a process during stage 3 and 4 that I briefly mentioned called growth hormone. And many people may have heard about growth hormone, but I want to sort of talk a little bit more about it. Growth hormone, or what I call Dr. Growth hormone, is emitted the largest part during stage 3 and 4 sleep. Remember, that's the deep, good sleep that you get in the beginning of the night. Well, growth hormone does all kinds of different things. It's responsible for tissue repair, cell replacement, even brain function. It actually even helps you distribute fat appropriately. So when you don't get enough sleep, guess what? Your growth hormone is not telling the fat where to go. So it ends up going to the same places over and over again. For me, that's right about here. For some people, it can be in the back of the thighs. There's a lot of different things that are going to be important about making sure that you have appropriate amount of growth hormone via the appropriate amount of sleep. We know that growth hormone revitalizes the immune system. We know that it can actually help reduce the risks of osteoporosis, again with skin elasticity, and it also helps reduce something called arterial aging. Now, I mentioned arterial aging before, but I want to go into a little bit more detail right now and give you some more information on it. What is arterial aging? This means that your arteries are not bringing the blood and nutrients to all areas of your body the most efficiently that they can. Pretty simple. But what we know is that if you're sleep deprived, your arteries age faster. So, is sleep the fountain of youth? Well, kind of, yeah. There is something that has to do with beauty sleep. It really isn't a misnomer here. If you sleep better, you look better. Now, the truth about aging is this. There's a lot of different factors that go involved with aging. Everything from your lifestyle to your diet, genetics, fitness level, your age, of course, stress level, environment, and other factors, including sleep. All of these combined make up that formula of how you age. Right? Now, you've probably seen all kinds of cosmetics and commercials and things like that out there that say, well, gosh, you know, if you slap on this cream and you do these things, you're going to look better. I'm willing to tell you that all of those products, while they may work, would work better with a better night's rest. Let me tell you about Shannon. Shannon came to me. She was a very interesting woman. She's a businesswoman, single, 2 to 3 days a week of travel. She always looked tired. People would always say to her when she showed up at her business, are you okay? Do you feel tired? Do you need to sit down? You know, and she was getting kind of offended by this. She was saying, well, gosh, I don't think I look too bad. You know, just checking herself in the mirror. I think I look okay. So she came to see me, and we started what's called a sleep diary. This is a very simple tool where all she wrote down was what time she got in bed, how long she thought it took her to fall asleep, and then what time she woke up. Now, I will warn you about sleep diaries. I don't want people, if anybody wants to, you know, do their own sleep diary, I don't want people looking at the clock until they fall asleep to figure out how much time it took them to fall asleep. You give a guesstimate, okay, of what's going on. But what we found very, very quickly was she was traveling multiple time zones. So, for example, she was based out of LA. When she was coming to New York, she was going to bed at 11 o'clock New York time. Well, guess what? That was 8 o'clock her body time. Well, it wasn't very easy for her to go to sleep. And she was scheduling meetings at 7 a.m., breakfast meetings at 7 a.m. Well, guess what? That was 4 a.m. her body's time. Well, that turns out to be a big deal. Of course you're going to look tired. If you took a meeting at 4 a.m., wouldn't you look kind of tired? Absolutely you would. So we started to learn more about her schedule. We started to understand what was really bothering her. And so we started to look at how can we do some things to make her sleep better. We ended up finding out she only slept about 6 hours, which wasn't her sleep number. She really needed closer to 7.5 hours. And we found out that if we increased her sleep just by about 45 minutes, she was going to feel a whole lot better. Her friends all of a sudden, once we did this, said, wow, you look great. What did you do? Are you on a new fitness plan? Are you taking a new supplement? And she just kind of smiled and said, yeah, no, it's my own little beauty secret. But what she was doing was just getting a little bit better rest. So she had more energy and felt better. It's pretty amazing. Sleep does a lot of interesting cosmetic things. And let's talk about the nitty-gritty or the physiology of what's going on here. Your quality sleep could probably, you know, pull about 3 years off your appearance, believe it or not. Let's talk about the big one, which I call under-eye baggage or puffy eyes, okay? Now, let me tell you something. If your grandma had puffy eyes and your mother had puffy eyes, you're going to have puffy eyes, okay? That's how it works. But we also know a couple of things about sleep deprivation and how that can affect the puffiness under your eyes. First of all, you should know that some of the puffiness under your eyes is fat, okay? It's cushioning for your eyeball so it doesn't, you know, knock around inside your skull. But there's also fluid that goes through there, all right? And what happens is a lot of people will have increased fluid and increased blood pressure due to sleep deprivation. And guess what? Fluid retention equals puffiness, right? So one of the things we know is when we wake up in the morning, our eyes are less puffy, hopefully, if we've gotten enough sleep. Why? Because part of the reason is that we slept. The other part of the reason is that we sweat, right? And we sweat out some of that fluid. If you're sleeping on a regular basis, your blood pressure should be more in a normal range, unless, of course, you've got issues with hypertension and things like that, which, by the way, can be directly affected by sleep deprivation. There have been some great studies looking at that. Let's also talk about dark circles under the eyes. So you should be able to see here we've got a gentleman with pretty dark circles under his eyes here, okay? Now, what we know is the skin right underneath your eye is some of the thinnest skin in your body, except for maybe the skin that you see between your thumb and your forefinger here. And what we also know is because of that poor arterial aging, or that accelerated arterial aging, that blood has a tendency to pool. Well, it has a tendency to pool due to gravity right here under your eye, and with that thin skin, guess what? Dark circles under your eyes. Now again, there's some genetic proclivity to this. If your eyeball is set back into your skull or things like that, you're going to have shadows, and that may look like it. But you can't tell me that if you get up in the morning on Sunday morning and you are out till 1 o'clock in the morning on Friday and 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, that you don't look like you got dark circles under your eyes, right? And so one of the things we know is you can actually look better that way. Another area of appearance that's affected by sleep is sort of a lifeless skin color. A lot of times people will wake up after a poor night's sleep and it literally feels like they're pale, that the blood is really drawn from their skin. And in fact, that might be true. We know that with more sleep, you have better circulation. And with better circulation, you have rosier skin color, a better skin tone, things of that nature. So sleep can affect almost every area. Let's talk about weight for a second. One area we must all understand is that weight loss programs, there are many of them. We see the fad diets, we see the different programs, the different groups that you can be involved with. And some people have a tendency to kind of do the yo-yo on the diet. Well, there's been some great information that's recently come out from the University of Chicago that tells us that your weight is directly affected by your sleep. Now, that's something that most people didn't know. But what I always try to tell people is when you look at these diet plans, you should really put results may vary based on sleep. So let's talk about that for a second. I believe that sleep deprivation can equal weight gain, and there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, when you're sleep deprived, you have higher levels of cortisol in your blood. Now, what does that mean? That means that you're going to have better appetite. Better appetite is not necessarily always a good thing, but more appetite. You're going to be hungrier when you're sleep deprived. That's number one. Number two, there are two hormones out there. One is called leptin, the other is called ghrelin. I think of ghrelin as the go hormone, sort of G, ghrelin, G, go. So the go hormone, what it does is it tells your body to eat more. Leptin is the stop hormone. It tells your body you're full. Well, guess what happens when you're sleep deprived? You have less leptin and you have more ghrelin. You have more go and less stop just from being sleep deprived. A couple other really interesting things. When you're sleep deprived, you have less serotonin. Well, what does that mean? That means that you have a tendency to be drawn towards foods that would increase your serotonin levels. Carbohydrates, high-fat foods, but even more so, comfort foods. Great study was done where they laid out a big table and they had sleep-deprived individuals there, and they had healthy alternatives on one side, and they had the super-duper chocolate-covered thing on the other side. I'll give you one guess where people who were sleep-deprived went for. They went for the high-caloric, high-fat foods. So even your food choice is affected by your sleep. And think about it. If you don't feel good, what do? You go for the snack, or you go for something that you think is going to give you some energy, and that makes you feel good because it tastes good. When in fact, you should be going for hopefully something that tastes equally as good, but that's a healthy alternative. And when you're sleep deprived, you actually don't do that. Good enough sleep can actually boost your burning capacity, limit your consumption by helping balance leptin and ghrelin. So when you're out there trying to lose weight, or you're thinking about becoming more healthful or more fit, I want everybody to know and understand that sleep has a very big role in it. I'll tell you about a patient where we had some really miraculous things occur. Her name's Connie. She's 45 years old. She was suffering from a small amount of low back pain from a car accident. And she wasn't sleeping particularly well, and so she comes into the clinic, and we start to talk. And what I found out was she would wake up in the night with what she called her to-do list. Well, she would wake up thinking about everything she had to do the next day. It's kind of hard to go to sleep when you're thinking about all of these things. So that was one thing that we had to really start to understand. She was a single mother of two. She had two kids under 10 years old, so that's a lot of work going on there. And her weight became an issue after her divorce. She wasn't going to the gym as regularly because now she was, basically the income. She was watching the children full time, so she wasn't able to really watch what she was eating as well as she thought she could. And all of a sudden she started to get a little heavier, and she really wasn't pleased with that. She tried several diets. And she became quite frustrated, to be honest with you. She called up a friend of hers after having tried 3 or 4 different diets, and she said, you know, you've lost some weight, what have you done? And she said, well, I kept a food diary, and I logged every single calorie that I ever ate during the day, and I logged all my exercise. And it sounded so depressing to her that she hung up the phone and ate a half a gallon of ice cream. She came to see me, and what did we do? We did a sleep diary. One of the things we found out was she wasn't taking care of her sleep. We also did a sleep study, and we found that she did not have sleep apnea. Some people, by the way, who are overweight will have sleep apnea, but just because you're overweight doesn't mean that you have sleep apnea. And I want people to know and understand that there's a difference there. The good news was that it wasn't that she had poor quality sleep, she didn't have enough quantity of sleep, and it was affecting the way that she was able to lose weight. Guess what? We got her more sleep, we had her life a little bit better regulated. Lo and behold, all of a sudden the diet started to take, and she felt a lot better. Not just because of her sleep, but because she lost weight. Guess what else happened? No more back pain. Because of the weight loss, it had all been sitting in the back and had been pulling on her back pain. So I ended up being a back doctor when I was a sleep doctor. So it was really, again, pretty amazing story of somebody who had all these different issues that she had no idea really had anything to do with sleep. So now there are a lot of reasons why people may not sleep. And I've told you stories about a whole bunch of different people, but there's a lot of things that we need to think about that could potentially prevent us from sleeping, right? So one of them is weight gain or snoring. So I was talking before about snoring, and people were kind of looking at each other and looking at their bed partner and saying, oh, this one over here snores, or maybe I snore and I don't want to talk about it here. But that's certainly one thing that we know affects people. We know that weight gain can also be associated with what we were talking about before, obstructive sleep apnea. Again, not in all cases, but certainly in some cases, and that can be a reason for sleeplessness. We know that menopause, premenstrual syndrome, pregnancy, all of these different areas can have an effect on your ability to sleep. We talked a little bit about women's health and sleep earlier. Time zone travel has been a biggie, right? Stress, bad lifestyle habits. Let's talk about pets for a second. Anybody in here have a pet that sleeps in their bed? Only one person. I have a cat that sleeps in our. Oh, we got some people in the back. Yeah. Well, it was a great study that was done a couple years ago looking at people who have animals that sleep in the bed with them. By the way, there are some English bulldogs out there that can snore louder than human beings. You put a Great Dane in your bed, you're probably not going to get a great night's sleep. Okay. We have a cat that likes to burrow under the covers, and all of a sudden you find him in weird places, and in the middle of the night he's sitting on your head and things like that. That can actually have a pretty big effect on your sleep. Okay, so one of the first things we talk about with people is what else could be bothering your sleep in the room? Let's talk about kids for a second. Okay, my daughter she's very precocious, and she figured out a way that at 2 o'clock in the morning, instead of tapping on the side of the bed and asking me to lift her in the bed, she burrows in from the bottom. I never see her coming. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and there she is lying right next to me. Well, meanwhile, she's already flopped around, because kids, they like to sleep horizontal on the bed. They don't like to sleep vertical. And so she's kicked me on one side and slapped my wife on the other. I mean, it's unbelievable. So again, things that can affect your sleep. Anybody got an idea what the number one thing that affects your sleep, other than a sleep disorder, that a lot of people in this room probably currently do? Any idea? Anybody here go to Starbucks before they came in this morning? Yeah? It's unbelievable how many people drink coffee and what that does to you. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a cup of coffee this morning. I am not saying that coffee is a bad thing. Let's be honest here. If I told everybody to stop drinking coffee, never have a glass of wine, don't smoke, go to bed at 8 o'clock, would anybody really listen to me? Probably not, okay? My sleep program is one that really works within people's own parameters. So it's okay to drink coffee. But let me tell you a story about Peter. Peter came to me. This very interesting guy. He started as a salesman at his organization. He was doing early morning meetings with his customers, and then late evening entertainments for new customers. Right? So he'd meet his current clients in the morning, and then he'd try to get new clients in the evening. Well, that was pretty much damaging to his sleep, and so he started to get into coffee. And by the way, there's a lot of really wonderful coffees out there, and there's all kinds of things to try, and it's kind of fun, and you go and you try this flavor or that flavor or whatever. But what a lot of people don't understand is that different types of coffee, or at least the way they're brewed, can have different amounts of caffeine in them. As an example, just a regular drip brew coffee has more caffeine in it than an espresso, okay, or a cappuccino. So people would tell me all the time, well, Michael, I have a cappuccino after dinner and I fall right asleep. Well, you might, but your brain isn't, right? And your brain is affected by that caffeine. A lot of people don't know this. Caffeine can have a half-life of up to 12 hours in some people. So if you're not sleeping well and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, Could it be the caffeine that you had at lunch? It's possible. Soda is a kind of interesting example. A lot of people drink soda or pop, and they find that they drink several of them throughout the day. Well, that may or may not be a big deal because caffeine in soda is probably about 60 milligrams, whereas in a brewed drip coffee, it's about 200 milligrams. The National Sleep Foundation says that you can have about 240 milligrams of of caffeine a day, right? So that's about a cup and a half of coffee. Well, Peter started out, and he was drinking about a cup, and then it went to 2, and then it went to 6, and then he was drinking a pot of coffee a day, all throughout the day. Now, you can only imagine he was traveling, and he was moving up the corporate ladder quite nicely over the years, because guess what? He was awake. He was working. Yeah, you know, he was really burning the candle at both ends. He was getting up early, having his coffee, going to his meetings, staying out late, maybe drinking alcohol with clients, drinking, you know, coffees in the evening, and he was really squelching down on his sleep. So the first thing we did was we said, well, you know what? We've got to take a look at your sleep patterns. We did a sleep diary again, and lo and behold, he was only getting about 5.5 hours of sleep. Well, that wasn't too good. So we needed to change his sleep schedule. Next, we looked at his travel schedule. Again, he was going East Coast to West Coast to East Coast, almost every week. So his body clock was off. So we had to look at his travel schedule. I actually gave him a sleep kit to use while on the road. So, you know, if you go to a hotel, sometimes it's not always easy to fall asleep in a different environment. Now, if you have kids in your bed, it's actually very easy to sleep in a different environment when you're away from them for a little while. But when you're on the road, you don't know where you are, right? So if you wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, guess what most people do? They flip on the light, they go to the bathroom, they flip on the light. Well, you know what that does? That tells your brain it's morning, even though it's 2 o'clock, and you stop producing melatonin. Melatonin is one of the things that helps you fall asleep. Okay, it's an internal endogenous hormone. So one of the things we did was we had strategically placed night lights. So he put one night light in the bathroom and one night light in the room that he was staying in. Guess what? He didn't whack his shin on the coffee table. He was able to go to the bathroom and come back, go right back to sleep. Turned out to be a big deal for him. Another thing we found out was earplugs. We had him bring some earplugs along with him. And it was amazing. When you get a room next to the hockey team, it's not always so good for business at 7 a.m., right? And so we were able to just some very simple things to be able to help him sleep better. Another thing we did was we gave him an exercise program to use on the road. Just 20, 25 minutes of cardio exercise was really a benefit for him. One of the things we know about exercise and sleep, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, is exercise dramatically affects the way you sleep. Also, by the way, sleep affects your exercise performance as well, so it's a two-way street there. After 3 months, we noticed a major difference in him. He dropped about 10 pounds. He was actually more productive at work, so he didn't have to spend nearly as much time there. So again, that balance in sleep helped create a balance in life for him. Let's talk for a second about that snoring bed partner, because we've had some discussions about that already, and everybody keeps looking to the right or to the left, so we'll go ahead and mention it now. People who sleep next to a snoring bed partner, I've already told you, lose about an hour's worth of sleep a night. But there's some very simple things that you can do to help with that. So that we all know what the regular technique is, right? It's the elbow to the right, roll over, buddy, and maybe the snoring goes away, right? Everybody's saying, yeah, Michael, that's right. Well, that's true, and that can help. But thing you have to remember, number one, is if somebody's snoring, it could be the sign of obstructive sleep apnea. So the first thing you want to listen for while you're hearing the snoring is, are they stopping breathing in their sleep? That's very, very important. Like we've said before, apnea is a very serious situation. If somebody snores and then stops snoring very briefly, and then makes some kind of strange sound and then starts again, you want to talk with your doctor about that. But believe it or not, if somebody just loses about 4 or 5 pounds, their snoring will go down almost 10 decibels. It's pretty interesting. So just losing a little bit of weight can actually help with that snoring. Decongestants can work. Now, a lot of people snore because they have a massive amount of congestion, or they sleep with their mouth open in the middle of the night, and they get really bad dry mouth, and they're making all kinds of strange gurgling noises and things of that nature. So just being able to talk with your doctor about having a decongestant can be very helpful. But be careful, because some of these decongestants can hype people up, right? Some people can take a decongestant, and boy, you got to peel them off the ceiling. So be very careful about some of the decongestants you might be taking. I personally recommend to my patients a saline solution, where it's just salt water, that they irrigate the nasal cavity, and lo and behold, after about 2 weeks, that tissue will start to shrink, and it works quite well. Nasal strips. A lot of people have seen those, the strips that go across your nose, or the throat sprays, or things like that. There is absolutely no clinical evidence that would suggest that any of those really work. All right? However, I will tell you that some people who have very, very narrow noses, If they place the strip correctly, it does reduce the volume of their snoring just a little bit. Probably not going to cure the situation, all right? We already talked about sleeping on your side, but remember, if none of these situations work or help, it's probably time for somebody to see a doctor. Okay? Now we're going to start out with our sleep evaluation in a minute, but I want everybody to realize one thing before we start, is remember your sleep number, and I'm not talking about that bed now, I'm talking about the amount of sleep that you require, is individual. Every single person in this room is going to have a little bit of a different sleep number. Some people's may be the same, some people's may be different. But the truth is there's not one number for everybody. And I want to make sure everybody knows and understands that it's okay if you wake up and feel good after 6.5 hours of sleep. But if you wake up after 6.5 hours of sleep and you don't feel so good, then that's not okay. Did you know that 66% of people not getting enough sleep get a prescription for a sleeping pill? Pretty interesting situation. A lot of times if you go into your doctor and you say, gosh, doc, I'm not sleeping so well, one of the first things that a lot of doctors are trained to do is write you out a prescription. Okay, you have to remember, sleep is a new medicine. A lot of the doctors haven't been trained in it yet, or they don't want to deal with your insomnia, quite frankly. A lot of people don't like the idea of being placed on a sleeping medication. Now, don't get me wrong, I have plenty of patients who are on sleeping medications, and there are some excellent, excellent, excellent sleep meds out there. So I'm not saying anything bad about sleep medications. I'm saying they should be used when they're appropriate and for certain short periods of time, hopefully, to break that cycle of insomnia and then allow people to hopefully get the tools to be able to learn how to sleep better. Another thing that we're starting to learn more about is a study actually that was done in the year 2000 found that 42 million prescriptions were actually given within the last year for sleep aids. 42 million. Now, if you think about that, and there are 300 million people in the United States, that's what, like 1 in 8 people could potentially have a sleep prescription? That's a lot of people being on sleep aids. And there's a lot of people who aren't very comfortable with that. So again, my goal is for people to know and understand how to break the cycle of insomnia and then create tools so that they can sleep better themselves. There's a lot of the PMs that are out there, right? You've seen them, you know, you go to the drugstore and it's such and such PM, such and such PM. Well, actually what those are is those are whatever the pain reliever is plus something called diphenhydramine, okay, or Benadryl. That's an allergy drug for people, okay? That's not a sleep drug. And it's interesting, if you look at the data, what you'll find is that diphenhydramine doesn't make people fall asleep any faster than placebo. Diphenhydramine doesn't make you drowsy. It gives you that fuzzy drug head. And people mix that up between drowsy and fuzzy drug head. The other problem is that diphenhydramine has a very long half-life. And people wake up and they feel hungover. And they say, gosh, I took that and it was supposed to make me sleep. And well, I guess it did, but boy, I don't feel so good. So when I ask my patients and I say, well, you know, were you able to shake off that feeling? They said, yeah. I said, well, how long did it take? They said, about an hour. I said, well, what were you doing during that hour? They said, driving to work. Right? Not so good, right? When people are fuzzy drug head, driving to work. So we have to be very careful. So we know people are looking for other alternatives besides the prescriptions. Another big factor are herbals. We have a lot of people out there who say, well, I want to try a more natural remedy for sleep, but I want to take something. There are probably 40 different herbals out there that claim to help with your sleep. Well, I'm here to tell you that there are only 4 that have any clinical evidence associated with them. The 4 are lavender, chamomile, kava kava, and valerian. That doesn't mean that I'm recommending any of these, but what I'm telling you is these are the only ones that actually have any clinical evidence that they work. Valerian is the most well-tested, but you have to be very careful. First of all, these are not regulated by the FDA. So if you're taking any other form of medication, we have no idea how this herbal will react with your other medication. Some of these herbals can actually thin your blood quite a bit. And so you can actually end up with heart issues. They go through your liver. You can have liver issues. So if you're going to be taking any of these herbal supplements, you need to be able to let your doctor know right away that this is something that you're considering and see if they can get you some information on how it could potentially be affecting what's going on. Okay, is everybody ready to do the sleep evaluation? All right, well, let's go ahead and start. Now, this is a question more for the men than for the women, but does anybody out there know what their collar size is? If you do, go ahead and write it down. Now, a lot of women won't know that. Men do that because we wear ties and shirts, and so we have to kind of know what our collar size is. But if you know what your neck size is, it's the same as your collar size. All right? Very interesting statistic. Anybody who has more than a 17.5-inch neck has over an 80% chance of having obstructive sleep apnea. Isn't that amazing? That's a big number. 80% chance of having sleep apnea. Wow. Again, remember, sleep apnea has got some pretty big effects on us. Do you snore or stop breathing in your sleep? Remember my first patient that I talked about, my GBI agent? He had a neck like a milk jug, okay? It was unbelievable. There's like an 18.5-inch neck, okay? Football players, by the way, we've seen a lot of evidence now. There's been some great studies looking at NFL linemen, and now the guys that are now out of the NFL, and they're not as toned or as fit, you'd be amazed at how many of these guys have got obstructive sleep apnea, and it's really hurting them. Are you tired or drowsy during the day to the point of nodding off or needing to stand up and walk around to keep yourself awake? Yes or no? If you are, that's not good. You shouldn't be that tired during the day. If you're getting good quality sleep, if you're getting the right quantity of your sleep, you shouldn't be that tired. You're too sleepy. I want you to raise your hand if you get less than 8.5 hours of sleep. Okay, how about 8 hours of sleep? Keep your hands raised if you get less than 8 hours. Less than 7 hours. Less than 6 hours. Oh, we got some. Less than 5.5 hours. We got one person here. Okay, so remember the statistic I talked about before. People who sleep less than 5 hours have a greater mortality rate than those who don't. But did you see in the audience here, we had 4 or 5 people who were right at the 6-hour range? Then the question I would have for you guys is, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? Do you feel good? Are you okay? Is that enough sleep for you? Maybe. You're shaking your head no, maybe not. So again, think about how much sleep you're getting. You'd be surprised how many people aren't getting enough sleep. Another interesting fact is that people who drive after being awake for between 17 and 19 hours, or who are getting between 5 and 7 hours of sleep, which, by the way, was almost this entire audience, when they're on a driving simulator, are legally drunk. Yes. Yeah, between 7 and 5 hours of sleep are legally drunk on the driving simulator. They're running over people, they're popping curbs, doing all kinds of stuff. Not good, right? That falls into the bad category here. How many nights per week do you have problems falling asleep or staying asleep? Is it 1, 2, 3? People who have problems falling asleep or staying asleep more than 3 nights a week could indicate insomnia or some variant thereof. Do you sleep with the TV, radio, or a light on? Yes or no? I'm getting a bunch of shaking heads, yes. There was a great study that came out of Japan that showed that even the light from a laptop can affect your ability to fall asleep, affect your circadian rhythms. Now, I've got a caveat about this. My wife falls asleep with the television on every single night. Doesn't matter what I try to do. If I turn the TV off, I can promise you that she'll be up for 2 or 3 hours more. What I think happens with a lot of these people is if they can focus in on one thing, like a boring TV show. I recommend C-SPAN, by the way, for anybody who wants to fall asleep. It'll knock them right out, all right? So sometimes the TV is okay. If you're going to sleep with the TV on, make sure you have a TV timer that will turn the TV off after about 30 or so minutes, because your bed partner may not be so happy with the TV on. Next question. On average, how many caffeinated beverages do you drink each day? This is a tough one, so I want you to make a couple of columns here. One is for like coffees, then one would be for sodas, and then would be in the other category, all right? And other would include things like chocolate. Don't worry, I've been told by the highest authority that if I ever tell people that they cannot have chocolate, I will no longer be married. Henceforth and forthwith, chocolate is always allowed, but we just need to be careful. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with caffeine or soda, but you need to be understanding and be careful of how it can potentially be affecting. So let's talk about it for a second. National Sleep Foundation says you shouldn't have more than 250 milligrams of caffeinated beverage a day. So we know that sodas have between 25 and 40 milligrams. Energy drinks may have between 50 and 80. Coffee can have up to 200, but maybe as low as 110 or even 50, depending upon the type of brewing. And of course, chocolate is only about 5 to 10. Alcohol impacts your quality of sleep. How many alcoholic beverages would you consume 3 to 4 hours before bed? Now, some people may not drink alcohol every night, so let's just say on a given week, first of all, how many nights would you have an alcoholic beverage? And then how many of them might you have? Research shows that more than 2 alcoholic beverages are going to have a pretty major effect on your sleep. Here's what alcohol does. Alcohol makes you fall asleep quickly, but it doesn't allow you to get into deep sleep, and you stay in the light stages of sleep. Half the reason you have a hangover is because of sleep loss. The other half is from dehydration. Okay? So one of the things I tell people all the time is if you're going to drink alcohol, which again, I don't have a problem with somebody having a glass of wine with dinner or two, have 1 glass of water for every glass of alcohol. That will allow for a couple things to happen. One is you stay hydrated. Number 2 is you'll urinate out the alcohol pretty quickly because your bladder will get full. You won't drink as much, right? Big question I get asked all the time, is a nightcap good for sleep? So far there's only one study that's ever actually looked at this, and it was equivocal. They don't know. For half the people, it affected their sleep. That's where you have 1 drink before bed, like a hot toddy or these things like that. And the other half the people, it did affect their sleep. So again, we don't know. Half the people it did, half the people it didn't. Very interesting idea, but is it something that I'm saying, hey, everybody go out and have a shot of whiskey before bed? No. But if that's your normal routine, then it may or may not really be affecting you in a derogatory way. Do you feel physically tense before you fall asleep? Yes or no? A lot of people say, well, gosh, Michael, I don't know the answer to that question. Well, if you just feel across your back and you feel your neck when you're lying down, you should be able to mush your fingers in quite nicely. If you can't, guess what? You're physically tense. Okay? A lot of people don't even recognize that they're physically tense. There have been some great studies to show that actual muscle tension can inhibit your ability to fall asleep. Are there things that you can do? Absolutely there are. Write your thoughts down. It's very interesting. There was a great study that just came out last month that looked at journaling before bed. I don't know if people in here have a private journal, but not just a diary anymore, but just writing down all the different things that were going on with you during the day. And if you had some issues or some problems, writing down some solutions to those problems has been shown to dramatically help people be able to fall asleep. Because you know what they do? They stop coming up with those to-do lists in your head, right? Because half the time when I'm creating a to-do list in my head, I'm trying to remember stuff for the morning, right? Because I don't want to get out of bed and write it down. You know what I found? They make these little pads now with lights across the top of them and pens with lights in them. Just write it down, that miraculous thought, that invention, that cure for cancer, whatever it happens to be, and lo and behold, guess what? You'll wake up in the morning and you'll probably find that your miraculous idea wasn't that great, but it won't keep you up at night. Listening to music can be helpful. I don't recommend, heavy metal to fall asleep to, but I will tell you that I've had some patients, especially some of my younger patients, where that's what they like to listen to, and it helps them fall asleep. Again, it's about focus, right? You can will yourself to sleep almost. If you're tired enough, you can sleep almost anywhere. But I guarantee you that you can make yourself not sleep. I don't care how many sleeping pills you've had. All right? There are a lot of patients out there where they could have 1, 2, 3 types of sleeping pills over the course of a treatment, and none of them work. And the reason why none of them work is because they don't allow their brain to calm down, right? And they don't allow their muscles to relax. Another big thing that now the NIH is doing a study looking at yoga and sleep. Does yoga help with sleep? And we're starting to find that it probably does. Stretching before bed can help with sleep. For some people, believe it or not, even exercise can help. And we'll talk a little bit about the types of exercise that are more helpful than not. Do you consider the potential impacts of food before you go to bed? So here's a couple of things I want to talk about. So number 1, the body was not meant to digest food lying down, okay? So eating and then going to bed within an hour, probably not a good idea. Number 1, you'll probably get gastroesophageal reflux, probably 3 or 4 hours before bed if you're going to have any food is going to be good. Let's talk about turkey. People always tell me all the time, oh, if I eat turkey, that's going to make me fall asleep, right? You'd have to eat a 46-pound turkey to have enough tryptophan in your system to get you to fall asleep. Here's the kicker of it all, is tryptophan does not work well in the presence of protein. Well, that's all turkey is. So even if you ate that 46-pound turkey, guess what? You're probably still not going to become sleepy. So people always say, well, Michael, why do I become sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner? Well, you probably become sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner is because you've been so stressed out about planning the dinner, or you've traveled somewhere to some relative's home. You may or may not want to be in your relative's home anyway, and it's a pretty stressful situation. When you finally finish the meal and everybody's sitting down and hopefully watching football or not talking or whatever it is, you start to get tired. A lot of people also, by the way, have Thanksgiving lunch as opposed to Thanksgiving dinner, and we know that there's a core body temperature drop that occurs every day in everybody between 2 and 4. And that's also a signal to your brain to get sleepy. That's where, by the way, the siesta comes from. We know that milk, by the way, does have tryptophan in it, and it can help. And that's where the old adage of warm milk comes from. So there's a lot of things you need to think about that could actually potentially affect your sleep. How many people in here regulate the temperature in their bedroom before they go to bed at night? Good. How many people in here know what the optimal temperature is to sleep? Yeah, almost nobody. Optimal temperature to sleep is somewhere between 68 and 72 degrees. If you go above 75 degrees, we start to see people really sweating, and we go below 65 and you see people shivering. Now let me tell you something. I live in Arizona, okay? If I could cool my house to 75 degrees, it might be a miracle, all right? So think about it geographically. It may change. It also may change by the season, okay? So you need to think about where are you living and what can you do. Generally speaking, if you can get about 25 to 30 degree difference from the high that day, you're probably going to fall into that range of where it's good to sleep. People actually sleep better in the cold. Believe it or not, in our sleep labs, we find that we have a big increase in the summer and a dramatic drop-off in the winter of people who are coming into the sleep lab because people don't sleep well in the heat. I've told everybody about beauty sleep now, and we all have learned quite a bit about it. We've also learned how sleep can affect our weight, and we did a sleep evaluation, and so hopefully now people are going to be learning more about their own sleep, and I even asked some people, and they said they're going to be changing some of their sleep habits tonight, hopefully, and getting a better night's rest. Now I'm going to help you create your own sleep system. But first, I want to dispel a very common myth. One of the first questions that a lot of women ask me is it true that men fall asleep after having sex? And the truth of the matter is we really don't know the answer. We've seen a couple of clinical studies, but nobody's really been able to come up with this answer. But I can tell you this, that every woman that I've ever talked to say that once men are finished with sex, a lot of times they get very, very tired and get sleepy. There are probably some good physiologic reasons behind that, but again, we really don't know why that would occur, and we're not really sure that it does occur in all situations. Another interesting question is, can sleep affect your sex drive? The answer there is yes. One of the things we now know is it's no longer not tonight I have a headache, it's not tonight I'm too tired. We're seeing that happen quite a bit, especially in our therapy sessions with some of our patients and our couples. We see a lot of women and men are saying, God, you know what? I'm just exhausted. I just want to go to sleep. I haven't slept well in 3 nights. It's just not happening for me. Another issue that we see is with, as we've talked about before, obstructive sleep apnea. We can see, specifically in men, impotency issues. So again, one more reason why if you have a snoring bed partner or somebody who is, stopping breathing in their sleep, that it could have a major effect on your sex life. How does sex affect sleep is often a question that I get. Well, there's a lot of different types of sex. There's more vigorous sex and then there's more sensual sex. I would have to guess, and again, there's no clinical data on this, but I'd have to guess that more sensual sex is going to be less arousing from a physiologic standpoint and may allow some people to fall asleep a little bit quicker. So again, thinking about how all of that can affect your world can be quite important. I don't want anybody to not have a good sex life. I want people to know and understand that the bed is basically made for 2 things, and that's sleep and sex, but know and understand how both of those affecting one another can have a major effect on your relationship. So now we're going to start to talk about that bedroom a little bit more, okay? And we're going to go for step 1, which is quality versus quantity sleep. Now remember that 8-hour myth I talked about before. Not everybody needs 8 hours. Everybody's got their own individual sleep number, and we'll be able to figure out how to calculate that. But let's start with, what time do I go to bed? A lot of people know when they're going to get up. It's when the alarm goes off, or I've got to get to work at a particular time. So we know that your wake-up time can oftentimes be predetermined or socially determined. What I ask people to do then is to count back 5 90-minute segments to know what time they should go to sleep. Now, Michael, why did you choose 90 minutes, and why on earth did you choose 5? Well, I'll tell you, the average sleep cycle lasts somewhere between 80 and 120 minutes, and 90 seems to be a good average for most people. And most people have about 4 or 5 sleep cycles throughout the night. So I'm starting with a general number, and I'm starting to work my way backwards. Now, for people in here who don't want to do a lot of mental math, let's take a quick example. If you wake up at 7 a.m., if you count back 5 90-minute segments, that puts you in bed around 11:30. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about 7.5 hours of sleep on average for people to try and get. So if you know what time you're waking up, you should be getting into bed about a half an hour before your scheduled time to fall asleep. And I'm going to tell you a lot of reasons why. Remember, sleep is not an on-off switch. It's more pull the foot off the gas and put your foot on the brake. So you need time for that process to occur. So in this scenario, if you wake up at 7, I want you getting in bed at 11, hopefully asleep by 11:30. Okay? If you try this for a week and it doesn't feel so hot, you may either need to plus or minus one way or another. So if you're waking up earlier than you would, or you find yourself staying in bed for a longer period of time than you think you need, then cut yourself back by a half an hour or 15 minutes. If it's not enough, add some time onto the front end. It's not always easy to do. Going to bed earlier can be difficult, but if you make time for sleep, you may be surprised at how much your body needs it. Another thing that we need to talk about is who in here is a lark and who in here is an owl. Okay? Now, those are kind of strange terms, and why would I ask you if you were a bird or not? But it actually turns out to be very prevalent and important for sleep. Anybody in here a teenager before? Hopefully everybody in here was a teenager before. So when you were a teenager, a lot of people say, well, gosh, when I was a teenager, I like to stay up until 1 and sleep till 1. Well, their entire biological clock was shifted. We know that this happens naturally in a lot of people, but there are some people who don't shift back, okay? And some people who are what we call owls. They like to stay up late and they like to sleep late. There are other people who are larks. They like to early to bed, early to rise, okay? This can become a major component when a lark is married to a owl, right? Because all of a sudden somebody's in bed early, and let's say that the owl, there's not much else to do, and they want to watch TV in bed before they go to sleep. Remember, I said that's an okay thing if it helps, tune your mind down a bit. Well, if that wakes the lark up, that can be a problem. So knowing and understanding your bed partner and when they have a greater likelihood of falling asleep can really be a pretty big deal. And there's a couple of questions you can ask yourself to learn if you're a lark or an owl. So the first question is, when do I feel most alert? If you feel most alert in the early morning hours, between 6 and 8 a.m. or 6 and 9 a.m., chances are you're probably a lark. When do you first start to feel sleepy? If you get that afternoon lull that everybody gets, that's one thing. But if by 6:30, 7 o'clock you're dragging around the house and you just can't wait to get to bed, again, you may be a lark. When do you enjoy waking up? If on the weekends you say, I love sleeping until 11, 12 o'clock, well, guess what? You're probably an owl. When do I have the most energy during the day? Again, if it's you get your second wind at 9:30 and you're up till midnight, well then again, you're probably an owl. So knowing and understanding what kind of person you are and what kind of person your bed partner is can be a challenge, but can also be a very important thing. What do you do with that information? Set your bedtimes accordingly and be aware of that other person. And I'll give you some tips and tricks in a minute for larks and owls when they're in bed. Step number 2. Now we know what time we're supposed to get in bed. Now we got to do a bedroom makeover. There's a lot of things that you can do to your bedroom to make it a better sleep environment that don't cost a whole lot of money and, by the way, can help you sleep a whole lot better. There are 3 areas that I'm going to touch on today. One of them is light, the other is sound, and the third one is touch. So let's start talking about light. So light, or sight, directly affects your circadian pacemaker, or that internal biological clock. When it's light out, it tells your body it's morning. So you need to have a nice, dark bedroom. Well, sometimes that's easy to have and sometimes it's not. If you are living in a place where they've got street lights, or your next door neighbor's got floodlights on their house or things like that come zooming into your bedroom, things you should think about. An easy one is, which way do you face your bed? The sun rises in the east, you want your headboard on the eastern wall. Why? Because then the sun will rise over you and go down. If your window is here and the sun rises in the east and you're looking straight at that window, guess what? You're going to get light at about 5:30 in the morning. The next area we're going to talk about is sound. This is also a very interesting area. If you're living in the city, there are all kinds of city sounds. I've had a lot of people tell me, I live in the city, but on the weekends I may go out to the country or go visit some friends, and it's too quiet to sleep, right? I've had that happen to a lot of my friends before. Or it's too noisy to sleep. There are certain sounds, by the way, that people are going to hear in their sleep. A baby's cry. Classic that fathers will say, I slept right through it, I didn't hear the baby cry, and the mother gets up. Well, the data has actually been found that dads hear the cry, but they fake sleep and say that they don't hear. A lot of men can actually, when asked and motivated, they actually do hear the baby cry. We can hear in our sleep, and so it's, again, important to think about that. We even actually see different EEG patterns or brainwave patterns when different sounds go off in the middle of the night in the sleep lab. Another thing to remember is smoke alarms. So if you have problems with sound, you may consider earplugs. Well, you need to get earplugs that are appropriately noise level rated. The noise level rating you want is 32 or below. That allows you to still hear the smoke alarm, still hear the baby cry, but still get a good night's sleep. Let's talk about TVs and alarm clocks. We've mentioned a little bit about TV, and I've told you that you got to use the TV timer if you're going to use the TV. But there's another culprit in the bedroom that I talk about all the time. How many people in here, by a raise of hands, hit the snooze button? Oh, we've got only a few people. That's good. How many people in here hit the snooze button more than 2 times? Oh, look, those same people are raising their hands. The snooze button was probably one of the worst inventions ever created that has to do with a timepiece. First of all, the average snooze is somewhere between 7 and 9 minutes, and you can't physiologically get back into deep sleep that quickly. So when people hit the snooze, oftentimes they tell me, wow, I hit the snooze 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 7 times 5, that's 35 minutes. You could have gotten 35 minutes more REM sleep potentially than hitting that snooze button 5 times. And what's more refreshing, stage 1 sleep or REM sleep? REM sleep. So a lot of times I tell people, look, do yourself a favor, set your alarm for the last possible moment when you could wake up, because then you're going to be able to get the most out of your sleep. Another thing that I want to talk about with alarm clocks is vibrating alarm clocks or pillow speakers attached to your alarm clocks. Guess what? Your bed partner may not need to get up at the same time you do. So why does the earliest person get to set the alarm and wake the whole house up? Some people can have 2 alarm clocks, or they now have these things that you can put in your pillow that are pillow speakers, so you can only hear the alarm in your pillow, or a little vibrating pad that you can attach to your alarm clock, stick into your pillow, and thereby, again, only waking you up. So again, being aware of your surroundings can be very, very important. Let's talk about the other area, touch. This is one of my favorite areas. This is the area I get the most questions about. What do I mean by touch? You have to have an entire sleep system. And what do I mean by sleep system? Pillow, mattress, sheets. So people always ask me lots and lots of questions about this, and I'm happy to answer them. But let me give you a couple of good pieces of information. So number 1, you cannot get more than 500 threads in a square inch. So when you see thread count on sheets, that's what they measure it by. It's physically impossible to get more than 500 threads. So when you buy a 1,000 count sheet, it's 2 500s woven together. It may be a little bit more durable, but it's certainly not going to be any softer. Anything over 400, you're never going to be able to feel the difference anyway. And in truth, it has more to do with the material than the number of threads. Lots of different types of cottons. I actually recommend a cotton silk blend for one of the softest sheets that you're going to be able to find on the market. And again, you don't need to have high thread counts. You can be in the mid 300 for thread count. And let me tell you, the sheets are fantastic. Now, would that really affect your ability to sleep? You bet it would. I had one patient who came to me and he said, Michael, I can't sleep. And it took us over an hour to figure out what was going on with him. As it turns out, he was sleeping on polyester sheets from college that he had had. He was a bachelor, of course, and he hadn't bothered to upgrade his sheet set like most bachelors wouldn't. And all of a sudden, he realized that he was allergic to his laundry detergent. And that was one of the things that was keeping him awake. Let's talk about pillows. How many people in here have a pillow that's older than 2 years old? Oh, about half the audience. Let me tell you something. Pillows should be changed every 12 to 18 months. There's multiple reasons why, and I'll tell you why. Number 1, sweat and oil. Guess where you lose the most heat? From your head. Well, your head is what's lying on the pillow, especially if you have a natural fiber pillow like a cotton fiber or a goose down or something like that. It goes straight into the pillow. Guess what else forms in there? Right? So guess what else comes in and invites themselves in there? That would be dust mites. So think about what you're putting your head on every night. Now, there are some antimicrobial pillows and some foam pillows, and those don't actually support dust mites as a living environment, so that's a good thing. But there are now even synthetic downs that are created, not real goose down, but synthetic downs that we find that are just as comfortable, yet don't have that dust mite problem. Another hint is if you have a pillow that's older than that or you're concerned about dust mites, stick your pillow in the freezer for 8 hours. It will kill all the dust mites, and you won't have to worry about that. I get lots of questions about mattresses. Let me tell you right here, right now, I've dealt with all the big mattress companies. There is no one mattress for everyone. Mattress is a personal choice. But people have to know and understand that. When you go in, and some of these mattresses, by the way, they're quite expensive. I saw, as a matter of fact, in the newspaper the other day that there's now a $50,000 mattress available. It's made out of horsehair, apparently. I know of no data to suggest that sleeping on horsehair would make you sleep any better than not sleeping on horsehair. So if you've got the 50 grand to blow and you're interested in having a comfortable mattress, I'd say try it out and see what the guarantee is before you go and you spend that kind of cash. Inner spring mattress versus a foam mattress. Again, there's really no data on one versus the other. There's one study that came out that showed that when people get a new mattress, they sleep better. Well, that kind of makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If you hadn't been sleeping well before and your bed looks like a taco, well, when you go ahead and you get a better mattress, you're probably going to sleep better. The other study that was done that looked at mattresses actually looked at low back pain. And here's what we found. When I was growing up, the harder the bed, the better. We even used to stick boards under the mattress so that the mattress would be really hard and flat. It doesn't work that way anymore. The natural curvature of your spine If you're sleeping on a very flat, hard surface, it means all the muscles that are attached to your spine stay tense all night. Especially if you're a stomach sleeper and you have a pillow on your head so you're bowing your back all night, you will almost be guaranteed to wake up with back pain over time. So what you want is a very supportive surface, something that molds with your spine. You don't want it too soft, but you also don't want it too hard. Again, that's why personal preference becomes such an important deal. When you go into a mattress store, a couple of quick things. One of the first things I tell people to do is show up about an hour before the store is going to close. Show up not necessarily in your lingerie, but in comfortable sweats or something like that, and make sure that you lie down for 15 minutes on each side that you sleep on. By the way, nobody sleeps on just one side. So think about that when you're testing mattresses, because you will find that some of them are more comfortable than others. There is one interesting fact that people may or may not be aware of. The weight of your mattress will double every 7 to 10 years based on oil, sweat, and dust mites. One of the things I get asked quite a bit is it okay that my mattress is 12, 15 years old? Some people have the same mattresses when they first got married, moved into their first home. All right, let's talk about step 3, eating right for a good night. We've talked a lot about caffeine. I will tell you this, do not go cold turkey off of caffeine. It's a bad idea. Number one, if you have any type of proclivity for migraines, you will get one. I had one patient we had to admit to the ER. She had such bad headaches and was vomiting from the lack of caffeine. So if you're going to, over a period of time, reduce your caffeine because you think it's affecting your sleep, I recommend something called caffeine fading. This is a situation where you take a diary of your caffeine use throughout the day. Let's say, for example, you're drinking 5 cups of coffee in a given day or 5 caffeinated beverages in a given day. Then the next week, I want you to reduce that number by 1/2. So if it was 5 cups of coffee, I want you drinking 4.5 cups of regular coffee and 1/2 cup of decaf, if you still have to have that 5th drink during the day. Each week, you reduce by about 1/2 cup. That helps you avoid the migraines, helps you avoid the nausea and the vomiting, and slowly allows you to detox from the caffeine. Alcohol, it's a whole nother ballgame. Again, I don't have any problem with a glass of wine, but remember my glass for a glass routine. If you drink 1 glass of an alcoholic beverage, I want you to drink 1 glass of water. Helps with the dehydration, also helps limit the amount of alcohol that you're going to drink in any given evening. Let's talk about vitamins. Okay, what else could we be putting in our body that could potentially help our sleep? Turns out that vitamin B has got a lot of different areas to it and a lot of different research to it that helps us know and understand a bit more about sleep. Vitamin B can actually help regulate tryptophan. And remember, tryptophan is one of those substances in your body that helps you fall asleep along with something like melatonin. B3 actually increases the effectiveness of tryptophan and has actually been shown in studies to lengthen REM sleep. It's pretty amazing. B6 is required for serotonin production. Remember, serotonin is one of your calming hormones. And B12 can actually help regain normal sleep patterns. So all kinds of amazing stuff. But I want everybody to be very careful, knowing and understanding that some people have what we call a paradoxical reaction to vitamins. They get energy, especially depending upon what's in them. So a lot of people, what I'll do is I'll say, take your multivitamin in the morning, but take Bs at night. Now again, some people may have a reaction to B, and so they need to understand that they could have some energy, so probably try it on a weekend. Folic acid is another form of B that also can have a lot of effects on sleep. And you can actually find B vitamins if you're not a pill taker and you're not a vitamin taker, you can find it in things like broccoli, potatoes, whole grains, things of that nature. Now we're on to step 4, exercise and sleep. Now, I'm a firm believer in exercise. I know that exercise is not always the easy thing to do, but there's some interesting data on exercise and sleep. Number one, we know that people who exercise on a regular basis have more deep sleep, more of that stage 3 and 4 sleep on a regular basis. But we don't know why. Is it because they're normally healthy people and they would already have more stage 3 and 4 sleep because they're exercise, or is it because of the exercise? We don't really know the answer to that question yet, but what we're learning is that exercise actually before sleep may not be such a bad idea. For some people, exercise can have a calming or relaxing effect, specifically for people who are more anxious. When I was in graduate school, I'm a runner, and I never got a chance to run because I was busy doing stuff during graduate school, and I finally got home, and it was 8 o'clock at night. So what did I do? I went for my run at 8 o'clock at night. By the time I got home, I almost fell into bed. I was so tired. Now, it may have been because I was exhausted, but the exercise certainly didn't prevent me from falling asleep. But I'm a kind of a high energy kind of person. I know some people who are not as high energy, and when they exercise, it gives them energy. Well, those are the people that shouldn't be exercising before bed. They should be exercising in the morning. Other things that we know is sleep deprivation can actually affect your performance. Now, I've worked with some elite Olympic athletes before, and when we've gotten them on a regularized sleep schedule, we've increased their performance by somewhere between 10 and 15%. Let me tell you something, for an Olympic athlete, that's the difference between a bronze and a gold medal. Anybody in here ever get a chance to take a nap during the day? I try to take naps all the time. Not all the time, but every once in a while. Napping is actually very, very good for you. There's been some great data to look at napping. But remember, napping is not great for people who have insomnia. So if you have a hard time falling asleep at night, don't nap during the day, because you know what that's going to do? That's going to make it more difficult for you to fall asleep at night. But if you're sleep deprived and you're a 5-hour sleeper or 5.5-hour sleeper, again, taking a nap during the day may be a good idea. But remember, don't take too long or too short of a nap. A general nap should be somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes. Have anybody here ever taken a nap and woken up and felt worse than when they went down for the nap? That's because you're trying to wake yourself up out of deep sleep. You've probably taken a 45-minute to an hour-long nap, and your body has finally gotten into that deep sleep, and boy, it's hard to drag yourself out of that deep sleep. So what I tell people all the time is either take a 25, 30-minute nap or a 90 or a 110-minute nap, so you get through a full sleep cycle and then wake up on the other end. There's also a trick that I'm going to tell everybody today, and it's called the calf nap. You may or may not have ever heard of this. If you're really in a bind and you need to get some energy fast, take a lukewarm cup of coffee, slug it, close your eyes, and go to sleep for 20 minutes. You'll get enough light sleep to help replenish you, and the caffeine will just about be kicking in, and you're good for about 3 or 4 hours. All right, it's one of my hidden secrets. Let's also talk about a napping kit. So many people, if they're going to nap, they're going to probably nap at work or probably not at home. So a couple of things you have to remember about napping. Number one is safety first. I have a lot of patients who say, well, I have a whole hour for lunch and it only takes me 15 or 20 minutes to eat, so I'll go out to my car and take a nap. I don't really like that idea because I don't like somebody being by themselves in a vehicle in a situation that could potentially be dangerous. So what I've actually had them do is have napping buddies. So somebody who sits in the car next to them who's reading a book while the other person is napping. Remember, safety is the primary goal here. But once you've got safety sort of covered and concerned, there's a couple things that you can bring with you in a little backpack to work. Number one is a very light blanket, because remember, our body temperature is going to drop when we sleep. Eye masks, because it's probably going to be daylight out. Earplugs can be helpful, and a little travel alarm to wake you up at the certain time that you need to get up. Because what you don't want to do is tell your boss, oh, I took a 3-hour lunch break because I fell asleep in the car. Probably not going to do too good for your career performance at that point. Step 5 is what I call the power down hour. Remember I told you before I want people to get in bed about a half an hour or an hour before they're actually supposed to go to sleep? Well, during that time, I want you to do something that I call the power down hour. That's 3 20-minute segments. The first 20 minutes is doing those things you have to do. In our house, it's getting the kids' backpacks ready for school, finding shoes. The next 20 minutes is all about hygiene, whether it's taking a warm bath, which, by the way, studies have shown a warm bath before bed can actually help people fall asleep. Specifically a bubble bath, interestingly enough, because the bubbles form insulation across the top of the water and keeps the water hotter longer, raises your core body temperature. When you get out of the tub, your core body temperature drops, which is a signal to your brain to release melatonin. So it's kind of cool. The last 20 minutes you use for meditation, relaxation, stretching. So 3 20-minute segments. A lot of people say, hey, Michael, I don't have an hour before bed. You can do it in 30 minutes, but then you want to do 10, 10, and 10. So I hope everybody has learned something today. I'm excited that everybody here has been so participating and enjoying what's been going on. Remember a couple of things. Sleep is crucial for every aspect of your life. It's critical, it's important. I want everybody to come away from here knowing and understanding that. Before you try another diet or a facial cream, remember, a lot of those things may vary based on your sleep. Sleep is powerful medicine, and that's how I think about it, that's how I look at it, is before you get on that next medication or before you try that next thing, think about your sleep and think about how it could potentially be affecting everything that's going on. Sleep is a new and exciting science, so we don't have all the answers yet, but we are learning them, and we are trying, as fast as we can. Thanks very much, and go home and get some rest.
We are PBS.